Quinn and Rose Show. Scott Baker filling in for Quinn and Rose. It's a tough job for one man to fill in for those two, but I'm trying. Here in the violently named War Room, are they still allowed to call it with a War Room? The FCC has not stepped in? Not yet, anyway. Glad to be with you, and already had a great first 2 hours and talked to a lot of you, and we've covered a lot of ground. Some of you may remember me. Isn't that guy? He sounds a little bit familiar. Well, some people remember me for the 13 years that I spent anchoring the news on WTAE-TV. And the last couple of years running Breitbart TV, and then last summer joined Glenn Beck's Mercury Radio Arts, and then formed the Blaze.com. We secretly launched that at the end of August, and we've talked about that some this morning. We'll talk about it next hour as well. But one of the things that has fascinated me in my time on the internet is I come to conservative news and web insight from my background of 20 years in the mainstream media, and as a recovering local television news anchor, I think my quack meter is pretty high. And I was diligent in the stories that we put on Breitbart TV, and I've tried to be equally as diligent, if not more so, with the stories that we put on the Blaze, to look for things of real substance. And in terms of, I don't believe in manufactured controversy. I don't believe in majoring on the minors, and I say that to set this up because we're going to talk about a new book called Deconstructing Obama by Jack Cashill. That it may sound we did a series of interviews with Jack on the BCast program that I do, and you go to thebcast.com to watch that webcast every day at 4, about his theory that Barack Obama's book Dreams from My Father was really written by Bill Ayers, the unrepentant domestic terrorist. And I think Jack's theory of several years in essays has been proven true. And why does that matter, right? Election's over, Obama's elected, now 2 years later, and some books come out, some things come out. Why does it matter? Jack has this is joining us on the phone now. The book's coming out here in just a days, I think. Jack, set this up for us. What does that mean, deconstructing Obama?
Well, basically, Scott, and thanks for having me on. And by the way, for the audience, kudos to your valiant effort yesterday, and kudos to you, Scott, for exposing this story even during the 2008 campaign when it could have actually turned the election.
To me, that I was thinking, if we actually can show that Barack Obama's book, the book that he claimed, I wrote this book. I said that to teachers. I wrote this book. If we can show that he didn't, he could not possibly have been a writer of the quality to do this, and that it was actually written by a guy like Bill Ayers, that would forget all of the other reasons not to elect Barack Obama. I really thought that would at least have been worth 3 points in the electoral.
Oh, absolutely. At least David Remnick, who's a big Obama fan and a liberal editor of The New Yorker, who wrote the definitive biography of Obama called The Bridge, says about my thesis in it, and this is a quote, he says, "If this were true or had been believed to be true by enough people, it would have ended Obama's candidacy because it did three things. One is that it would show him to be a total liar about his relationship with Bill Ayers.
Right.
Secondly, it would show that he had an unrepentant terrorist crawling around in his head.
Right.
And they shared ideas. And third, and this is the critical part that many in the public don't understand, is that Obama was presented as a unique genius, and that genius rested entirely on his authorship of this memoir called Dreams from My Father, which Time magazine called the best-written memoir ever by an American politician.
Right, and many conservatives were shocked when Bill Buckley's son, Christopher Buckley, endorsed Obama and said, "I read his book. He's a first-rate mind."
Right, that's right. And a lot of the New York, D.C. kind of conservatives were taken in by this. They thought he was one of them in their club, the cool kids club, and unlike people like Sarah Palin or others, people who spoke like Marge Gunderson, they excluded them,
Right.
And some of them supported them. David Brooks and the sort of the weak-minded, weak-kneed alleged conservatives, Christopher Buckley. But it was a fraud.
Well, let me ask you this, because it was a fraud. You and I talked about it on a number of programs, and it is deeply fascinating to me. And I have about 10 questions and ways to go in on this. But I know you've spent obviously a good year writing the book, and you probably have the best handle on what are the essential things for us to focus here this morning. So I'm going to let you guide this, because there's so many directions here. But what's most important?
Well, once I got into the book, Scott, I realized that there was a second important question. The first question is, did he write the books that he claimed unique credit for having written? And the second question proved to be equally important, and this surprised me. And I got into it through the poem that he allegedly wrote as a 19-year-old called Pop.
Right.
And that is the story that he tells in Dreams from My Father, and the story on which he based his candidacy, the story of this improbable love between the Kenyan goat herder and the little Dorothy from Kansas, and their marriage and their faith in America and all this stuff. Was it true? And the answer to both questions is no, he didn't write his own books, and B, that story is not true in some significant ways, and ways that have actually created the whole birther movement. Because what the birthers know, I mean, I use that term generically for anyone who questions Obama's origins, is that the story they were fed is false. And the media have helped perpetuate that story for the last 3 or 4 years, since he entered the national stage in 2004, without challenging, without asking the most basic questions. And that is I think the part that really intrigued me once I got into it, because I knew when I started the book that it was a matter of proving that Ayers was the primary author. But the real exploration for me was to find out what happened in those first several years of Obama's life. Who is he? Who's his father? Who is the Pop in the poem Pop?
Right. And when you look at when you look at what shapes a president's mind and what shapes the decisions, and it does explain a lot. And you talk, because your first clues about Dreams from My Father was that he'd written nothing else that indicated that he could possibly have been a writer of this quality. And you did a lot of analysis of metaphors and images in Bill Ayers' book, and compared them to things in Dreams from My Father, and it was like the literary fingerprints, were there.
Right.
And to me, it's also, I might have suspicions that Bill Ayers probably helped craft I stood in Boston 20 feet from the podium when Obama spoke at the Democratic convention. And I thought this was amazing. I thought this guy's going to be president someday, and I was right. But I don't think Obama's given a great speech since he's been president, and I think it's probably because Bill Ayers isn't writing them anymore.
Well, I suspect you're absolutely right about that, Scott. His principal speechwriter is a guy named John Favreau, who was 23 when he helped him with the 2004 speech. And Favreau is a pretty good speechwriter, but he's not. Favreau is almost assuredly the principal writer for Obama's second book, Audacity of Hope.
It's more of a campaign book, kind of a collection of.
That's right. But Favreau is not Bill Ayers. Ayers is actually, say what you will about his, he's a whack job, but he's a very skilled writer and editor.
Right.
And and this is what I think may happen to protect the Obama myth. The people who've addressed this issue have to attack Ayers as a writer. I've heard it said, he's a hack writer. He's some political hack. No, he's an excellent writer and editor.
Right.
His own book, Fugitive Days, is very good. It's a good, useful read for anyone who wants to learn how these people think,
And you are an excellent writer and a good judge of writing in your own regard. And yet, when you were first postulating these things, you were considered a nut job for doing so. And really, the story was largely ignored. And then all of a sudden, a book comes out that's about Obama and his marriage. Yeah. And it was like a bombshell.
It was. I should say, it should have been a bombshell. This was the book, Barack and Michelle, Portrait of American Marriage. And what made it useful is that it was written by a guy who has no vested interest in undermining Obama. This is like a sort of a glowing love story about the Obamas, and he writes for essentially a female and liberal audience. And this is his 14th biography, celebrity biography. His current one is on Kate and William, the heir apparent of England. And what he discovers, though, in doing his research, is that Bill Ayers was the principal writer for Dreams from My Father. He spends 6 pages in the book on this. The book comes out in September 2009. It's easily the most newsworthy part of the book.
Right.
It totally validates my thesis.
And then he was on Hannity. I think that's where I was like listening to Hannity, and it sort of came up, and I was like, my jaw dropped.
Yeah, Hannity was one who is the only one who raised this issue. Now, and when Hannity did that, I got about 1,000 emails the next day. Did you see Hannity last night? Did you see Hannity? You know, so I checked out the site. I couldn't believe what he had said. You know, but then I went online to see how the reviewers were reviewing the book, and I found about 80 mainstream reviews. All the major publications reviewed it, which will not be true in my case. And of the 80, do you know how many of them mentioned Bill Ayers at all? 0.
Yeah.
It's not people think this is a willing media conspiracy. It's what it is. It's a collusion of like-minded people. 80 reviews. Not one. And by the way, Christopher Anderson spends 6 pages on this. He talks about how they were in debt, how he was hopelessly blocked in his proposal, how Michelle was riding his butt, how he finally turns to his friend and neighbor Bill Ayers, and blah 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 blah. In detail, how he delivers his manuscript and his tapes and all that stuff. And 80 reviews, 0 mentions of Bill Ayers. Period. Let alone this controversy.
I would have loved to have been able to say to O'Reilly yesterday, please ask the question. We're talking with Jack Cashill, author of the new book, Deconstructing Obama, The Life, Loves, and Letters of America's First Postmodern President. We're going to take a quick break, and you stay with us for one more segment, Jack.
Yeah, sure. I'd love to, Scott. Thanks.
You're listening to the Quinn and Rose Show, The War Room. Scott Baker filling in for Quinn and Rose. Your calls and more with Jack Cashill, 1-800-507-1047.